Hello, my name is John James and I am a writer and campaigner for male victims of female perpetrated domestic violence and an advocate for men's mental health. This week on FTD Talk, it will be guest hosted by Nick. I want to take this opportunity to thank Nick for all his help while I take a hiatus for health reasons. Nick is an excellent guy. He's a survivor of female perpetrated domestic violence himself. And he is a great interviewer. He interviewed me on the first episode of my fourth season, and it's just fantastic. This week he will be talking to Jon Butchko about his abuse, false allegations, and family court. It's a very interesting conversation, and I hope you find it interesting too. So you take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Peace.
So similar to John, I'm also an advocate for men who have suffered at the hands of female perpetrators. So I'll be honest with you, John, I don't know your story, so I'm coming into this fairly cold. Basically, have you been in a similar situation to myself and John? Are you too a victim of domestic abuse? Is that your story?
Yes, I am, and mine really had a kind of a weird start, or a weird part right at the beginning, where here in the U.S., many of our laws, as I'm sure they are over there, are aimed towards arresting men, and my career, my family, everything, my housing situation was all immediately put on hold. At the end of the day, when I came home from work, and a girl that was living at our house that I was involved with, she started, an argument with me. She got very physical during it, and then did a technique known as swatting, where you have somebody across town call the police on your house, and they showed up, they arrested me, they put me in jail. My face and my name and all of that was splashed all over the local papers, because I was our version of football, like, American football. I was the football coach of a high school right here in our area. And that's a very salacious headline. So I had a very, very, tough start at the beginning, because at first I was a defendant. I had to win a court case. I had to win a case with Children's Services trying to take my daughter. I had to win a case with the Ohio Department of Education trying to take my teaching license. And then I had to win a case with my employer to keep my job. And that was all founded, off of the lies that took place, that evening. And I begged the police when they showed up at my house, you're going to start an unfortunate chain of events. There's got to be a supervisor we can talk to. They said she had marks on her arms, and I sarcastically told them, I'm sorry my face got in the way of her punches to cause discoloration to her arms. And in the now 10 and a half months since this has happened, since that event happened, I've lost my home. I was fortunate enough to win in court, but the newspaper articles that were written, the Twitter stuff that was written, that all still exists and continues to haunt me. I waited, 6 months is what they have to charge somebody with a misdemeanor crime. And I waited till it was like 6 months and a couple days later, and I asked the court, why didn't we charge this girl? And they said, well, you're fortunate to have gotten your case dismissed. Basically, I couldn't schedule a meeting. They said, we only communicate with attorneys. We don't offer legal advice. I said, I'm not asking for any advice. I have very specific questions that need to be answered. And flat out, they won't answer them. There's not a shred of legal documentation of the lies I was accused of. And, this has been just wretched, for my family. It's been terrible for my daughter and I. And it's, again, continued to haunt me to this day. The accusations have continued to haunt me to this day. As for, it took me a really long time to process the situation, because I had to do so many other things first. I had to I had to win a court case, and then win a case with Children's Services, and then win a case with the Ohio Department of Education, and then win a case with my employer. And then, okay, I won all those cases, but now I'm homeless. Now where are we even going to live? And I'm under contract, and my family lives, about 2 hours from here. So I can't really, move to my mom or my grandma or my brother's couch, because that's 2 hours each way to go to work every day. What am I going to do? So that it took me much longer, I think, to process it, because my affairs were knocked out of order, than it probably normally would.
Gosh, there's an awful lot to unpick there, Jon. Crikey, you really have been through the ringer there, haven't you? Crikey. Okay, so so you're across the pond, so in a completely different time zone. So, obviously, don't disclose anything you don't want to. So, whereabouts are you in the States, Jon, if you don't mind?
I live about an hour from Cleveland, Ohio. So I'm right along Lake Erie, in what's called the Midwest here. I know a lot of people from other countries either pick New York or LA, so we're closer to New York, probably I think 6 or 7 hours from New York City.
Yeah. Okay. Almost worlds apart, but there are so many parallels between what goes on, with men like yourself in the States and what happens in the UK. I mean, the laws are slightly different, but the experiences are astonishingly similar in terms of what goes on. So, so you're abuser then. Let's just get a grasp of timeline. So I heard you mention 10.5 months there, but when did you first meet your abuser then? Just tell us a little bit about that.
I first met my abuser. Her daughter and my daughter are actually very good friends, and they're actually still friends to this day. So it was right when we moved up here. I came to be the head football coach and to teach here in 2018, and our daughters became friends sometime in 2018, 2019. So I was aware of who this girl was. We really didn't, connect or interact with one another until like the late part of 2020. And from then until the summer of 2021, we had a relationship. I don't really go out. I don't go to the bars or anything like that. So it was hard at times to meet women, and I figured what would be better than my daughter, who I was just going to win custody of, and I successfully won custody before this, thank God. What better way than to reintegrate her back into things here than to have one of her best friends, involved in her life on a daily basis. So, that was kind of my line of thinking. This one was a little bit younger than I am. Just kind of a different place in life than I was at or am at. And that was okay. I cared, and she had a couple of children other than the one that was friends with my daughter. And we kind of made it work. As that started to fade, the control was what was going after. And it didn't just start one day. It started with, the text messages or the idle threats, or, I started to become recognized for excellence in my profession. And that was like one of the hardest things in my interpersonal relationship, was like, I was being recognized on the news as for excellence as a teacher, or, some other award for sports or education. And it was like the first time it ever happened in my career. So of course I was excited. But that drove a huge wedge. And that's when a lot of the negative behavior started. Like I said, started with the threats, started with just otherworldly texts. I use my kids to ruin you. People will find out what a heathen you really are. And I'm just a dad that goes to work. I got like 4 jobs. I just go to work and live to provide. I don't, I not like a lot of hobbies. Not, I don't really have anything that dominates my time other than work. And that's where, and I was baffled. And I remembered reaching out, some people close to me, and I won't name them in case they watch or whatever else. But there's people close to me that I reached out and say, hey, I just got to show you this stuff, in case something goes wrong. And that was probably 2 months before this whole plan was put into motion. And I didn't know I would ever need it, and it didn't really help me. But I started to sense, that some things were going wrong, and I could really use some help. Um, and again, those people are good, well-meaning people. I don't think the whole thing moved really, really quickly. But I tried to reach out. The main point I'm trying to make is I tried to ask for help. I tried to, at least cast some light on what was going on at home. But it was a delicate balance. I mean, I worked in a very public position, a public school teacher, the most popular sport in an athletic department's head coach. You can't exactly have crazy going on at your house and then go lead people. People look at you, kind of skeptically when that happens. So, I mean, I didn't go into it completely blind, but I also, didn't. I always I've used the example of people close to me and females that, my profession is like 75% women. So I've used examples of close friends to me, and if this was their situation, what would it look like? And of course it would look differently. So why is mine any different than that?
No,
Has always been what
absolutely.
I circled
Yeah.
back
Yeah,
to.
So when you first met this girl, sort of around 2018-ish, what was it like at the start? So at the start of the relationship, were there any red flags? Was any sort of early signs, or was it all good, or everything was smooth and going well? Was it?
Well, when I first met her, we were both married to somebody else. But when we started to be involved with one another, she was divorced, and my divorce was just about final. My ex-wife was nowhere in the picture. She was completely on the other side of the state of Ohio. So yeah, there were some red flags, unaccounted for time. you know, I think like when people don't give you access to the people around them, like they confide in a cousin or a friend or, somebody else, and that person's not, a friend of yours, or doesn't at least respect the spot that you hold in your life, that should be a big red flag. And it was. I just missed it, or just, was oversightful. So yeah, I mean, there were some red flags, talked about situations that, in our personal conversations with one another, that she had been involved in, and the other person was always the aggressor. The other person was always, always the victim of it, or she was always the victim of it. I mean, those are things that were said. Those are things that took place, in the times we'd speak to one another. But again, you dismiss those things. You try to take people you care about at face value, and why would there be a reason to lie? Like, I mean, these are people that I wouldn't, I don't really hang around with girls I'm seeing as ex-boyfriends or ex-husbands. So like, you just kind of chalked it up to, well, she's got to be telling me the truth, because I have no information otherwise, and I care about this person.
Yeah, yeah. So were you? So you sound like you were just coming out of a relationship with your ex-wife. Was, if you don't mind me asking, was the relationship with your ex-wife, was that abusive as well, or was that a kind of, you had just drifted apart and were getting divorced?
It was more just drifted. It was more just drifted apart. I would think that, even to this day, my ex-wife and I, we share a child that's 13 years old, and she has a son that's almost 18 years old who I helped raise. If it was something involved one of our children, or we just wanted the older one, her son had just gotten recognized. We both attended it. We actually had dinner both with our daughter, and then she has no visitation. But since we were down there, I let my daughter stay a couple of days, and I wouldn't say it was abusive. I wouldn't say it was very effective either, but it was, it wasn't anything like, I see that you have something, and if I can't be a part of it, I'm going to take it from you. It wasn't that way in total. People, there were some ugly parts in the divorce, but divorce is ugly. It's heart wrenching. A lot of people.
It's never pretty, is it?
Yeah. So, there was some probably conflict heavy parts of that, but by and large, I mean, it was just two people moving in two different directions, and it's a thing that I certainly hope that her life gets better for the sake of our daughter and her son, that they can have a mother they'd be proud of, and she'd do things that would make them proud. So I don't really help those efforts, but I'm cheering for them. But no, my marriage wasn't like that, not at all. And really, I don't think any of my prior relationships were too much like that. I had moved around a lot to start my career, like worked in one place, worked in another. So I hadn't really been anywhere for a while, like I had never really put down roots in my adult life. So this was like my first attempt at that in my late 30s. And it, boy, I can pick them.
Okay, so the relationship with the abuser then. So how did it? At what point? What happened? And at what point did you then start to think to yourself, "This is unhealthy. This is not right"? So I think you mentioned you got some text messages and things like that. So just tell us a little bit about.
Yeah. I don't have any trouble saying those kind of things either. It was early on. It had only been a few months, and things moved really quickly, but they moved quickly out of necessity. Her grandmother had lived with her, and she had gotten really, really, really sick, nearly died in our house. So she needed like extended home care. So that kind of accelerated the curve. Like you can't move an 88-year-old woman around who's hooked up to all kinds of machines. So I was like, look, there's space in my house. Just, I can handle the bills here. Make sure that your grandmother's taken care of, take care of all of our children. And it was like I said, it had only been a couple of months. And a situation came up with one of her kids that had happened before they ever lived in my house, or was alleged to have happened before they ever lived in my house, that there might have been some inappropriate touching or whatever have you. And when they were talking to the police, and of course I'm not that girl's parent, so I wasn't any part of that. I had gotten some information that, even there, like my name had come up, and we had only been around one another on a crazy, on an involved basis for a few months. And, that was when my antenna first went up, and from there it got worse. Text messages making threats, one day I came home and she had bought a new refrigerator or something and just left it outside. And I got home at like 10 o'clock at night. All I wanted to do was go to bed because I'd worked all day. And, everything was just, being launched around the house, was being, thrown around, and it was really, really crazy. And that, was probably the first time it ever got like scary. And then from there, it just continued to get worse and more prevalent, and it became a daily thing. It became, something doesn't go my way, I'm not cleaning the house, I'm not making any threats. It showed me a bunch of, draft emails that, even if they're not true, it's just meant to bring disreputation to me. It's meant to bring, harm to my professional life and my professional persona. And again, these things, they are 0.0% fact. And, that type of fighting dirty was absolutely, when the corner switched, and, it had been a pretty big and involved argument. And like I said, things were thrown at me. Things were, you're ducking and dodging cups flying at you and all of that stuff. And I just thought to myself, man, I got to get a job. I got to get somewhere else, figure out what to do. There was a moratorium in the United States on eviction, so I couldn't even evict my roommate. I was just stuck. And even the night it all happened, it started really early on in the afternoon, that my daughter, who was 12 at the time, texted me and said, "Hey, Dad, I gotta go. I'm gonna go stay at my friend's." And she's, good luck with that. She's being crazy. And I remember turning the corner to come home, and I passed that friend's house where my daughter was staying. And I knew the friend's parents a little bit. And I was like, you know what? I should just sleep on the couch. I should just sleep on the couch at their house, or I should sleep in my car in some parking lot somewhere. I got to be to work in just a few hours. I should really do something. And I said, man, I got to go home. I got to take a shower. It doesn't look good to stay on somebody's couch. It doesn't look good to sleep in your car. What's the worst that could happen? And even like when the police arrived at my house, I really thought I hadn't done anything. Like, I knew that I hadn't done anything. I knew what my level of involvement was. And I tried to communicate to them, and I begged them, to think about what's going on here. Like, I didn't even say any bad words. I didn't stand up. I never tried to split hairs and say I pushed her off of me, because I never did any of that. I just covered up, and like a boxer that's getting beat up in like the 10th round, and they just cover it and take a bunch of body blows. That's exactly what I did. And I had never in my life talked to the police, not even for like a speeding ticket, where I had been more innocent in my life. And it didn't even matter. And from that moment on, my life has been irreparably changed.
So some of this behavior then, so throwing things at you, and it sounds like because you were covering up like a boxer, that it sounds like she was the sort of person that was going to throw punches at you. Is that right? Is that the kind of
thing? Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in your opinion, what were the triggers for that kind of behavior? What would trigger her to do that?
Well, I think it was like losing control of the situation, that I wasn't going to sit there and just let that go on. And then, you threaten me enough so you get your way. I think that was one of the triggers. I think, probably there was some, and I'm no psychologist by any stretch of the imagination. There's probably some unresolved stuff, going on in her life, that would trigger some of that stuff, good days and bad days, or whatever kind of situations people go and involve themselves in. I would imagine that was a lot of it, but it was really, the one time I can remember that, like, I always kept like a little stash of money in my nightstand. Maybe I get hungry and want to order some food or something, or, just a little bit of money to have around no matter what. And, a $50 bill, which are hard to come by, was taken out of there. I knew exactly how much was in there, and I knew what denominations of money were in there. And like, you can't go to the ATM and take out a $50 bill, right? Like, you have to go to a bank to get it, or somebody has to hand it to you. And a $50 bill was missing. And there had been some people in and out of my house, and I started to say some things and pointed the finger everywhere, that you could point it. And magically, I went to the gas station and came back, and my money was there. I just didn't know where it was. Now, I had taken this drawer apart like 8 different times that night, like every piece of paper out of it, everything that was in there out of it. And then magically that $50 bill reappeared. So that was, that was a really seminal moment. And again, like, if you try to hold them accountable, I guess, would be another one, like, hey, this is how the world operates. This isn't unique to you. This isn't unique to me. This is just what happens. My property is my property. Yours is yours. And everybody else's is theirs. That the accountability part of it was huge.
So if there was a flare-up, an incident where she got violent, how often would you say that was happening? How often, how regular was it that she was violent with you?
It started off as once every couple of months, and then it was once every couple of days, and it accelerated very quickly. If you're playing the law of averages, again, it would be probably once every 3 months at the beginning, and then maybe like once a week or once every 4 days at the end. So okay. That was it was a very rapid thing. And it was like being on a treadmill, man. We just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And none of it was very effective.
And what supplementing the violence, what can you tell us about this kind of verbal abuse, if any, that you were subject to?
Oh, it was all kinds. You're a fraud, you're a phony, I'm gonna show everybody what a heathen you are, what a terrible person you are. It's no wonder your mother doesn't love you. Your daughter doesn't love you. Nobody could ever stand you. Those type of people, man, when they have access to information, that information gets weaponized pretty quickly. It was all kinds of stuff. I mean, just every which way. And I mean, I interact with a ton of different people on a daily basis, of all different ages, all different, spots in life. And it was always, I want to show everybody, just how bad you are. And I was honestly being as well behaved as I've ever been. Like I was consciously being very well behaved, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing when I was supposed to be doing it. And that was the sum total though always pointed back to, somebody else. Somebody else doesn't care about you. Somebody else, doesn't think that you're as capable as you are. A lot of the triangulation stuff that you hear about, they'll bring an uninvolved third party and kind of play 2-on-1 a lot of times. And that's a lot of what happened. Some family that I was very helpful to for a long time, they didn't have a car. So they couldn't get their daughter to school. So I'd get up, probably an hour more than before I needed to get up to go to work, go and pick them up. They would drive me to work and borrow my car all day. And like I would be stuck at work without a car, but somebody else could get their life, their affairs in order because I had the resources to do so. And that was that meant I was doing something wrong. And, again, I was just trying to help the people I care about.
So verbal abuse, physical abuse, domestic abuse comes in different forms. You can, be abused financially and possibly sexually as well. Were there any other elements? Tell us about anything. Yeah.
Financially as well, that I talked about, the levels that I worked at and all of the, the resources that would bring me. And, it was, let me borrow some money or, all of a sudden money's missing somewhere, somehow, or, just funding this persona that they think they have. And I mean, it's really done off of the hard work that I'm doing, 14, 15, 16 hours a day, in a number of different, ways and shapes and forms. And, it was always, it was something that always, and then of course, with the stuff you got to pay for an attorney. Like, I mean, I had to pay like $5,000 to make sure that the world knew I wasn't somebody that put my hands on somebody else. So that was part of it. And I think probably if you're using a balance sheet, then trying to take away my ability to earn, make sure that my options to earn an income and we employ, people that have to be at least somewhat, quote unquote, good people, to work with young people. And that was trying to be taken from me as well. I think as another medium of control.
Yeah. Did any of this abuse occur in front of the children?
No, not really in front of the children. I can remember one time that, like there was a little flare up and I really, it was, I guess, towards the final event. And I made my daughter sleep in my bedroom. So that way, nothing silly could be, alleged or accused. And, I mean, my daughter was getting to the age where she's getting older, but, she could sleep in my bedroom and that way there's another set of eyes on it. And you would think that at least, your daughter is gonna understand what's right and wrong and tell the truth. And the truth really doesn't have to defend itself, but, a very tempting lie, sometimes grabs the lead for a while. So, while much of it didn't happen in front of the children, and her kids would be like 4 days there and 4 days gone. So every 4 days, there was only one of the kids in the house. It was very stealthy. Even that night that, the police showed up, two of her children were there. Her oldest child and my child were gone, and none of it occurred in front of them. None of that occurred in front of them. Although, it is alleged that one of her children was told to lie to the police, made them kind of tell them something they didn't see.
Yeah. So do you think that was an intentional strategy of hers to sort of make sure the children didn't witness it? Or do you think that was just a matter of circumstance that it
No,
just so
I
happened
think
that
I think it was very intentional. Our daughter, my daughter, and her oldest daughter are roughly the same age. They're about the same age, and my daughter's a very autonomous, very independent young woman who has a very good concept of what's right and what's wrong, and to always tell the truth and be truthful about her situation and her circumstances, and it just wouldn't go anywhere doing that kind of stuff in front of her. The lie would be found out as quick as it was said, if it happened in front of my daughter. And not that her, and again, I don't want to pick on kids. Not that her kids, they should be listening to their parents. The hope is that their parents are telling them the right things. But you're only gonna, when you're a child, when you're in the very young ages, the single digit ages, you're going to follow the lead of your parents, and that guidance is going to take you a lot of places, whether that's the right places or the wrong places.
Yeah, so you didn't see her, you're not aware of her being abusive towards her own children then, for example?
No, I'm not. I'm not, and I don't think that that's ever been a thing, for them. I don't think that you would ever term whatever I witnessed as abuse. No.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so her energies were very much concerted on towards yourself. Did you ever attempt to address her behavior? Like, so if there was a flare up, she did something, did you ever try and reason with her, or maybe the day after, try and, in the cold light of day, try and talk to her about what was going on? Did any of that happen?
Absolutely. There were many occasions, hey, we got to go a different way. Hey, I'll be supportive. I care about you. Even if this falls apart, you can get your things in order while you're here. And I care about your children like I care about my own child. And, I would extend that to somebody I cared about. Certainly there was talk of doing better, and you get the lip service. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to take this step or that step. I need to get some help for this issue or that issue, and then it's never followed through. So that was a very regular conversation, and became more regular towards the end. And then, right up before the end, I had to wash my hands of it. You can't drown trying to save somebody else. And, when you're going out, if you picture somebody, flopping around in the middle of a lake because they can't swim, and you go out and try to save them and they push your head under the water, well, what good have you done them? And what good have you done yourself? And that's really where my situation ended up, when it came to its head, in the end of June last year.
Right. Okay. And then, so when it came to a head, tell us a little bit now about that.
Well, like I said, it came to a head. Yeah, it started. That whole day was a really, a penultimate day. You can even back it up to the beginning of that week. I had to leave. A friend of mine had a death in the family. I went to the funeral, or the calling hours. I'm sorry. I went to the calling hours. I stayed down there, and I came back up, and went right back to work. And, you could tell that kind of the rhetoric following everything had gotten a little bit more aggressive. There's alleged to be a lot of substance abuse stuff on her part, and that plays a pretty significant role in this. And as we moved towards the end of that week, that all happened on a Friday. I woke up that morning, and we had a split level house, right? Different family lived upstairs, and we lived on the ground floor. And the people upstairs weren't, nothing good. And the one is, I think, going back to prison actually now. We had like a verbal disagreement. Everybody in the world knows who lives at this house, and they think it's me, not you. And I was kind of aware of his situation, and I told him, hey, dude, you're about to have a bad day. Like I just make simple requests for my house and you're about to have a bad day. About 10 hours pass because I go to work all day and night, and a flurry of text messages. And at one point, like about dinner time, I was like, listen, you're dying to have a fight today, and I'm just not going to argue with you. I'm just not going to do it. And, there was almost some collusion, because I was getting in the way of maybe some other interests. You can read between the lines there, and I have to always be careful about the things that I say because a lot of people pay attention to them, about some other interests with the people that lived upstairs. This setup, I mean, I walked into a hornet's nest when I came home, and again, I went to jail, and how that goes, even though I was booked in with several $100s in my pocket, you can't even bail yourself out. Like, you have to sit in jail until you go to court. And I went to court on Zoom, just like we are right now. And as a matter of fact, my hotly contested custody case had what's called a guardian ad litem, which is an attorney that acts on behalf of your child. Well, my guardian ad litem was the magistrate that arraigned me on my criminal cases. And she was aware of who this girl was, of course, because they have access to everything in your life. And I remember greeting her. I said, good afternoon. And I won't say her name because I don't want to get in any more trouble because I still live here. But I said, good afternoon. And I said, well, how are you? And she said, better than you, Mr. Butchko. And, I think, like, I had my court hearing and they were going to release me on my own signature. And I knew I couldn't go back home. As soon as I was released from the jail, and I was so mad, I was so angry at the world, I started just walking. Although I was probably like 15 miles from where I live, I started just walking, and the people that I eventually made contact with that came and gave me a ride found me walking down this road. And that woman who was still at my house, who became a squatter, who eventually had to be evicted from my home because she just wouldn't leave, even though I stopped paying the bills for many months, texted me and said, I made you a plate for dinner. If you're not going to come, let me know and I'll throw it away. And, that really started a bunch of crazy, for the next 6 weeks while my case was pending. I mean, it was every day I would get a text or a phone call that, I just want you to come home. I want to drop the charges. It never said I lied. Never said, I completely made all this up. People that lie hold on to that lie as their last, bargaining chip. And it was always like doing weird things. Like, we both had iPhones and would turn the location on and share the location with me. So, like, that's information I didn't even want. You know what I mean? Like, first of all, I wasn't aware of it for a couple of days because I wasn't texting this woman or calling her or anything like that. I was really afraid when that happened because, anything that goes wrong in their life, they say, well, you knew where I was. And I had to go and get clothes to go to court. So I had to have a police officer. I'm sorry, wait a minute. As soon as I got out, I had to go and get clothes to wear. I get arrested, you don't get a lot of time to pack. I had to go and get clothes. And I remember a police officer had to escort me in and out of my own home. And this guy was, he's been on the force a long time. You can tell he's an older guy, not really caring about keeping me safe. And my room is hidden from where he was, right? My bedroom where all my possessions were. And I go back there and there's at least some evidence of some weird things going on in my home. And she rushes back there. And now here I'm out of sight of this police officer that's there to protect me with a woman that had just lied to put me in jail. And they're not doing anything to, like, not saying, hey, you sit out here in the living room while this is done. Hey, you leave him alone, let him get his things and go. And, like, I had to physically walk right next to her to get out of there. And I eventually had to come back and get clothes for court, which was arranged through a friend. And, she would try to communicate messages to me all the time, but it was always about come back. It was never about, I'm sorry. It was never about, I got to make this right. It was never about, I lied. I was less than truthful. It was always about, all of that. And it was, let me regain control of this situation. But, my personal situation, my situation that allowed me to provide for my family, was ruined. I was on leave from work. I was under investigation by my professional entity, and I had children's services nipping at me every turn of the road. So, it wasn't just oops. I made a mistake. Let's not acknowledge it. Let's never mention it again. It was, I did this on purpose, and it had some real, tangible consequences. And I think it bears noting, that as I've been able to, win these different things, win my court case, win my children's services case, win my professionalism case, win my, arguments against my employer, my case with my employers, if you will. And I've looked to go forward and hopefully do better than I'd ever done before. The thing that continues to bite me, and countries in Europe do a much better job of this than we do here in the US. Because it was a local media piece, because it was, I guess a thing of significant interest locally. I've been at war with our local newspaper about a concept known as de-indexing and unpublishing. So much so that every member of my teachers union has written a letter to the editor and asked that they do this, because it was baseless, and it shouldn't be the first thing that comes up when you search my name. Hopefully it'd be one of the 500 good things I've done in my life, and not one of the less than 500 bad things I've ever done or was accused of doing that I didn't even do. And I remember I went to the paper's offices and spoke to the editor, and I said, man, are you familiar with these terms? De-indexing, unpublishing, that are out there. And again, that I think is, you're right, in your country and in many countries within Europe. And he said, no. I said, well, you advertisers haven't been in this profession a very long time. I said, it took me like 4 minutes on Google to figure this out, and it's almost like the salacious nature of some of the details is way more important than what the truth is. And, people have referenced that if they've talked to me. People have, asked me questions about that. And certainly, people that, know who I am and, know what I was accused of, they treat me much differently as a result of what they read in the newspaper, and it continues to be there. I mean, you could go on Google right now and search it, and that would be the first thing that comes up if you just punch my name in.
Yeah. Okay, so can you just clarify, John, what when the police came round? So when the main incident, when the police came round, who called them and what were they called for?
Well, the phone call came from a cousin of hers across town.
Okay.
And the nature of the call, it's not even really listed in the police report other than a domestic dispute was ongoing.
Okay.
But as I recall the incident, I'd come home, I was ready to go to bed. She insisted on listening to music in my bedroom instead of any of the other 10 rooms in the house. Had to be right there in the bed I was trying to sleep in. And a phone call wouldn't happen if music was playing. So there was a break in the action, and I was swapping texts with a couple of friends of mine that were very mundane and time-stamped, and went out and must have placed the phone call and came back in and got really aggressive. And, you could hear sirens off in the distance, and it was, hey, MFer, you're going to jail. And when they showed up, they asked me, do I want to press charges? And I said, no, I don't want the police in front of my house. As I told you before, everybody in the area knows who lives at this address. I don't like this kind of attention. It's like 11:30 on a Friday night. People could make all kinds of wild assumptions about me, and none of them were that I just worked all day. And they said, okay, well, you're being arrested then. And I said, for what? And they said, domestic violence. I said, well, how? He said, well, she has marks on her arm. And I was like, that's from hitting me in the face. I'm like, you guys can't be the gatekeepers of my freedom. There has got to be somebody we can talk to. There's got to be a supervisor we can talk to.
So basically, she'd assaulted you. She got some bruises from the assault against you. And when the police arrived, she falsely accused you of being the attacker, basically, is what happened. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they weren't even bruises. I mean, it was just marks on, if you scratch your arm, your fingernails, it would be the equivalent of that. And, they allowed me, to have my phone and like on the ride to jail, have my phone, because I was responsible for a ton of other people. And by the time we made it to the jail, a 10-minute drive, my credit cards were notifying me they were trying to be used and they didn't have any money. She had taken the credit cards out of my wallet and attempted to take money from them. And I remember telling the officers, I was handcuffed to a bench in the booking area of the jail. I was like, you don't think, and I showed him right here, you don't think that this was part of the plan? My card is being used right now. You don't think getting me out of the way and trying to use my card, and later I unearthed about 10 other attempts to get some money for herself out of my cards. And they said, well, we're not doing this. She probably uses that card all the time. You're being petty right now. I said, as a matter of fact, there's never been a transaction on that card ever. I bought that card. I got that card for my daughter to use when she travels because it's hooked to my account. And she had just lost some money when she jumped on trampolines or whatever else. And I was like, so nobody has ever used that card. Not her, not me, not anybody. And she went in and found this card and was trying to use it, to get herself some money. And I said, this seems like it's a much bigger, it's a pretty big part of the plan here. That if you have somebody locked up for a couple of days, you can do whatever you want with their stuff, and there's nothing I could do about it. I wouldn't even know about it till I was released from jail. And with all of that said, all of the requests to talk to a supervisor, all of the, information I could point to at hand. And what I didn't know until much later was she had tried to recruit her ex-husband to come down and get in a fight with me. And apparently there's text messages. I've never seen them, but apparently these text messages exist. And that's not somebody that gets abused. Like, that's somebody that's looking for the fight.
So your version of events, when you gave the police your version of the events, did it just fall on deaf ears? Did they pay any attention to it? Did they attempt to inquire whether there was any truth in what you were saying?
Not really. Two of them respond. So one talks to one party, one talks to the other. And I think the guy that talked to me, and again, I won't say his name or anything like that, but I think the one that pulled me aside and talked to me, he realized that something was probably up, but he also had a job to do. I don't really give him the benefit of the doubt with how my life has changed, but you could tell that, he was conflicted. The other guy, the other officer who talked to her first and then, followed me around the house as I gathered some things to take with me and give to my daughter who had arrived. He was very unwilling to even listen to what I was saying. I'm trying to tell you these things. I'm trying to tell you what happened. I'm trying to tell you the truth. I have a whole lot more to lose than anybody here. I know I have to behave 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Other people, maybe without so much at stake, they don't have to behave like that. And, they weren't really interested in what my part of it was. Even as it got to court, even as it was dismissed, in court, they made me pay court costs. They wouldn't come right out and dismiss it on their own. They were very, our legal system here and all of its faults is so big and so voluminous that it could never be efficient. And it's not just as it relates to me, that's as it relates to anybody. They want to get in, probably plea out so they don't have to take you to trial. And from the very beginning, I just told my attorney, like, hey, we're not even entertaining a plea bargain. They're going to find me guilty of this crime. And I think when it all changed, you know, going from the day that it happened to the day that I went to court, you know, I spoke with, you know, people in my personal life at all times. And, you know, the message was pretty clear. You know, you saw my face on the front of the paper. Well, what do you think is going to happen the next time I go to court? Like, they're going to be there for that too. Are you going to be confident enough to sit up there and lie and just be dishonest? Because I mean, you're going to end up there too. And if you're capable of doing that, if you're comfortable with doing that, I don't really want to be around you. I don't really want to know you if you're a person that could throw somebody else's life away over something that's completely made up. So, you know, and I was dealing with two attorneys. I was dealing with my defense attorney and with an attorney hired by my union, because my position is a union position. And I really couldn't be as aggressive as I wanted to be. I couldn't say, hey, this is made up. I couldn't, you know, the times that it was requested that people talk to me, you know, I couldn't talk to them. You know, and a lot of people had just assumed, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire, and there wasn't even any of that.
That's the saying I hate the most. There's no smoke without fire. Oh, there is a lot of smoke without fire. When it comes to domestic abuse and false accusers, there's plenty of smoke without fire, I can tell you. Okay, so these initial charges that she placed against you, which you got arrested for,
Mm-hmm.
did that come to anything? Did you get convicted in court? Did that come to anything, or did you manage to, you know, defend?
No,
that?
they were outright dismissed. You know, she went in and she eventually
Good,
showed up the day I had court. And again, I mean, there's no, like, I don't know what evidence they think they had, but there's really just no evidence that existed. And I remember asking the police that night, how do you want me to prove to you something didn't happen? Negative. I was like, you know, I've tutored math students for a long time. You can't prove a negative. You can't prove the absence of something happening. And they really didn't like that answer. But I mean, I was as clear-headed as you could be, you know, like I just got off work. I was tired and I was really, really frustrated with what was going on, but nothing was clouding my thinking. My charges were dropped. They were dismissed. And that was the second win. I actually had gotten the children's services case dismissed prior to that. And now I had to go fight for my career. And, you know, in the time after that, you know, because those next two came pretty quickly after that, the Department of Education and the career stuff, you know, happened in very short order after this. And what I think, you know, even when my charges were pending, but certainly after they've been done, there are like no resources that want to help men. There are like none in the United States or really anywhere else in the world.
Same in the UK. Same in the UK. Yeah.
Like there's a program here locally, and just by complete like chance, a friend of mine's brother is on their board, and he took a picture at the board. So I got them, I guess, to make a little bit of contact with me, but there are no resources whatsoever. There's nothing, and that's crazy. I don't want to fancy a guess how many, you know, what percentage of this stuff is false in any others. I think you have to look at every on a case by case basis, but I mean, I know of at least one because it was mine that was completely made up. You know, and if it happened at least once, it's probably going to happen or has happened again. And as men, you know, there are not resources at all to help you in a case like you're absolutely lost. You're left to your own device, and you know, you're left to try to figure it out yourself and advocate for yourself. And when you're going up against an entity, I don't care if, you know, I've gone up against the newspaper, against the court system, against, you know, whatever have you, you just get drowned out because you're just one voice. And it's almost like we want to act like this problem doesn't exist.
So that actually, John, leads me on to what was going to be my final question in terms of the aftermath. How did you cope with, what support did you get, if any, and how have you coped with all this aftermath, and you know what sort of impact has it had? I mean, I can see that reputationally reputationally, you've had a battle on your hands. But what, if any, what support have you had? I mean, family, friends. I mean, how's it worked
Well,
for you?
I've had a a better than average, I think, amount of support. It's come in different waves. At first, there was a family that helped my daughter and I just with a place to live and a place to be safe. And apparently, I needed another adult to know where I was at all times. And that that checked all those boxes. That I was going to be safe, and I was going to be able to categorically fight everything I had to fight. So that was the very first thing. Then the people in my life, from you're having a bad day and this hill seems insurmountable. I mean, like the other football coaches in the area, like those guys who, you coach against them, them a little bit. I mean, whether it's the guys at neighboring schools that I've gone out to lunch with, or we've had long conversations like this, and it just kind of, they were strong for me when I couldn't be strong for myself. They have been a tremendous resource. Different colleagues, throughout as time has gone forward, have been very helpful. People I didn't even know consider me a friend, had been very helpful towards me. I mean, to the point it almost moves me to tears, how great those colleagues and those other coaches had been. But nobody has been more supportive. And I put this on everything I've ever cared about. Nobody has been more supportive, has been, kinder than the students at the school that I work at. These kids, I mean, and everybody has something negative to say about kids, has something negative to say about high school students. I don't think, no matter what country you're in. And our students at the school that I work at, and I won't drag the name of it in, you can look it up, but I won't say it, from the very first day, like in open house, right when this all got resolved, to through the fall, through the winter, they have been stopping, how has everything been? Are you okay? I mean, these aren't honor students doing this either. These are just, very average, maybe below average students, but from the top of the class all the way to the bottom, they've been very caring and very supportive. And I think like one of the things that's been the most therapeutic, and I don't know that it's always probably the best situation to be involved in, but, we got through it. We kind of, we're able to knock down a lot of the barriers by talking about it. And I don't know that it's made me popular, but it certainly had them asking me a lot of questions, about that experience, about, what happened, about, how it was being in the jail cell, because that was my reality for a few days. And somebody will be, recognized by that same newspaper, and I'll, have a cheeky comment to say about it. Oh, if it's in there, it's got to be law then, or it's got to be biblical. I had a coach who was a legend that I played for that always said, young people are resilient and they keep us young. Well, I tell you what, like at the darkest time of my life, and I hope that this makes its way back across the pond so some of my students can see it. I don't think they realize how good a care they've taken of their teacher. Like, it could be something positive they say, or when they come and they ask, for advice, or they want to discuss a situation, or even they want to, we've even made up, they had homecoming really early on. And I was in the cafeteria while they were selling tickets, and we started doing like toxic dating advice. Cause I always said, I got this dating thing down. I don't care what the newspaper says. And like, so we would make up like funny, false dating things. And that became our thing. Like they would hunt me down. The hard part became making stuff up. But certainly, that they cared and they embraced me, and they, they brought out a lot of good in me at a time that maybe I didn't really feel like going on. I didn't feel like continuing to try. I didn't feel like continuing to do better than I'd done the day before. These young people, I mean, they lifted me up, and they lifted me up in a great way.
Well, look, Jon, I've I've been a sports coach myself, and I'm also a teacher. And if your students are showing you that care and compassion, it's because you've taught them that. You've role modeled it, and they're like that with you because you are clearly a very caring and compassionate and passionate teacher. So those students are a credit to you, mate. That's why they're giving you that back. So, and that's wonderful to hear. It really is.
Oh,
I'm glad you had that.
Oh, it's great to experience. And again, I mean, I can't say thank you enough. And you know, the adults in my life to different degrees have been helpful. But like I said, the young people around, they've they really did some positive things.
Well, they're a credit to you, mate. That's what
Thank
that
you.
is. Listen, just my last question, really. Just your abuser, like where is she now, and what's the situation between you and her now? Is it like kind of, are you just don't see each other, or what's the state of play with that?
Well, I really couldn't tell you where she lived. I would assume it's still in this area. I really haven't spoken.
But you don't have anything to do with each other, right?
Yeah, I haven't really had much to say to her, in the time since, other than, it would really be the right thing. You've talked about these positive things you've done in your life. I think the next positive thing is going back and righting some of the wrongs that maybe you did. That would be, probably what should be done. But, there's not really any type of a relationship. There's not, I hope, because it's a fellow human being, that things get better for them. I try to walk a path that I'm supposed to be walking. And I hope that, nobody else is affected this way. But I don't know that I could really have any interactions with that person. How would you ever pick it up and go from there? I don't know that you could.
No, no, don't go there. Don't go there. Well, look, it's amazing, Jon, that you've done this, spoken out, because I know that Jon, who hosts FTD Talk, it's about getting the message out there that that you as a survivor, you're not alone, and anybody listening or watching this who might be going through something similar, listening to what you've just said and what you've gone through, it'll give people great strength and courage, I believe. So, and I hope it inspires other men to come forward and tell their story, because, the strength in numbers and all that kind of thing. And I think that, we've got to slowly try and get that message drip through, that this is not a female victim issue, that there are men out there that are suffering this at the hands of female perpetrators. So, thank you so much for speaking out. Really appreciate it.
Well, and if I could convey one message to any man that watches this, you're not alone. I'm very easy to find on Facebook. My example, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, has been a very public example, especially, in my portion of the United States. I'd be happy to speak to any of you. I know that there's not very many resources. I don't know that I am a resource, but hopefully I could be helpful to anybody that I could. And in a situation that I was in, I was so embarrassed, being a man supposed to be associated with a very, rough and tumble situation like American football. And here we are, we're talking about essentially a woman beat me up. And, the sun comes up tomorrow, and you have a chance to go forward. You have a chance to continue your life. It's not always easy. It's not always a straight line. It's not always the way you want it to be. But I mean, the only way to beat this is to continue to try, because the world really doesn't care if you lay down and give up. And I think in a lot of cases, they would prefer that you did. But man, if you have a support system, or if you don't, use that support system or find one. You need it, because you'll drive yourself crazy thinking about some of these things. And I'm crazy fortunate to have some of the people in my life that I have. I think, I hope that the good out of this is, God has given me the platform, to help other people, to help the people around me. And I always use football as a vehicle to do so. But maybe now it's time to use something else. And I really, really encourage anybody that, goes through a situation similar to mine. And I know there's much worse ones out there. I'm not trying to diminish anybody's situation, but to reach out, to let those people know exactly what you're thinking, what you're feeling, those that care about you, because they will help you. People will do some really remarkable things, and all you really have to do is bring them into your life. And this is like the 5th or 6th appearance I've made. That's just a function of, kind of where my career has taken me, where the life I lead has taken me. If you live a little bit more anonymous life than I do, that doesn't mean anybody thinks your situation's any less important. And certainly as a person that would have a commonality with you, I know that I don't. So I hope that message is very, very clear.
Jon, you've been an absolute inspiration. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.